Hi everyone, I'm Dale Smith, aka Journo Dale, and we're here to talk about Canadian politics. All right, it's time to take some of your questions, and they are all coming from Twitter this week. First one is from Ryan St. Jean, or St. Jean, who asks, how often does Patrick Brazeau attend Senate sittings? From what I watch, he doesn't make many interventions. Um, I did try and look up. So, background here is that Senate attendance is tracked publicly. MPs' attendance is not. But it's not readily available to find where that is. You have to generally go in and deal with these in person. They don't have an online portal for this. But I did look and notice online that he hasn't made any interventions or made any votes since June. And I have not seen any particular explanation or reason why. And I also noticed that he's not on any committees currently, possibly because he's one of the non-affiliated, meaning he's not in any of the caucuses or groups. And it's more difficult for those senators to get onto committees as a result. But that is a good question. There are avenues to find that out. But yeah, from what I noticed, he has not seemed to have made any particular interventions or votes since June. So perhaps there's a story there. This is all I was able to dig up at this point, but possibly something to keep an eye on. So thanks for that question. Our next question is from Jean Haley, who asks, can a person become prime minister if they can't/won't get security clearance? Obviously, in reference to Pierre Poilievre, as I've responded in previous videos, it's not that he can't get security clearance, is that he won't use the clearance he has to see particular documents or get particular briefings because he's making the calculation of, so it breaks down into either you're an informed overseer or you're an ignorant critic. And if you're an informed overseer, which means you have, you've got your clearance, you've taken the briefings, you know what's going on, you tend to need to be a lot more serious and circumspect in what you say. Whereas the flip side of that, the ignorant critic can say whatever they want because they have chosen not to get any of the briefings or so on. And Poilievre falls squarely in the latter there. Sorry, in order to, I guess, extrapolate this into, were he to become prime minister, what would this, how would this change that? So obviously there's no way to really refuse these kinds of briefings when you're prime minister because you need to basically make these decisions. So again, it's not a question of can't get security clearance because he does already have it. He was a minister at the time. He's taken his Privy Council oath, which requires you to keep secret things which are meant to be secret. And and it's an interesting hypothetical about what would happen if you have a prime minister who has a particular background that would preclude getting some kind of clearance, but they would have to, the security services would have to find some way of dealing with that because the prime minister needs to be able to have this kind of information. But as for a refusal, I think that would be pretty much impossible to do as a prime minister because you do need to be informed of these things and in order to make particular decisions. There may be a higher reliance on certain staff in that regard. But again, I don't know how that would necessarily work. So yeah, I think that would probably not be able to work, really. So yeah, I that one kind of stumps me a little bit. Other than what we're, yeah, you can't be an ignorant critic when you're the prime minister, because you must, by definition, be the person making the decisions, and therefore you would require a certain level of information for that. So yeah, interesting hypothetical, but I don't know that it would actually work in real life. That's kind of where we are. Our final question today comes from Patricia Sutherland, who asks, what is being referred to in the Senate rules around adjournment and privilege and so on in the current news? In the current news, yes, there is a question of privilege being raised around bullying and intimidation. Partially, this was to do with certain senators who had kind of a yelling match around this vote on an adjournment, which I'll get to in a moment. And also in relation to certain MPs who had tweeted essentially for their followers to engage in harassment and intimidation of these senators over this vote. What privilege tends to refer to is the ability of a parliamentarian to do their work unimpeded. And there's various ways in which that happens. Partially that has to do with the ability to speak freely within the chambers, so you can't be... this is partially where the thing about not being able to be sued for what you say in the chamber, that kind of thing, that's what privilege protects, is the ability of the MP or senator to do their job in order to, and that means saying whatever they need to say. Or it means they can't be impeded access to getting to do their jobs. There's sometimes questions of privilege arise if security won't let people through, or the MPs or senators through for whatever reason. We haven't had too many of those complaints lately, but they did happen every now and again. In this particular case, that has to do with the senators feeling like their ability to do their job has been impeded because of this level of harassment and intimidation. So that's what that's referring to. It's the Senate Speaker hasn't made any kind of a determination on that yet, but I suspect there will be something that a possible prima facie case, which then takes the question to committee for them to study further. When it comes to the adjournment, so what this refers to is just the ability to put off continuing the debate to another day. And one of the things with the Senate rules is that they are structured in such a way so that every senator has the opportunity to speak to every single piece of business on every single day. Not everyone does that, mind you, but it gives them the ability to. And what the adjournment tends to mean is someone wants to speak to this, but they can't do it today, so they will adjourn the debate for another day. And then there's usually some kind of a clock or a counter around how many days they're allowed to adjourn for. What happened in this particular case was, as they were debating this particular bill, pardon me, one of the senators moved an amendment, and then one of the leaders of the ISG, the Independent Senators Group, had senators who wanted to speak to this bill but who were not present at the time, and so she moved the adjournment so that they could pick it up at a later date and just carry on at that point. Some of the conservative senators were up in arms because they were ready to keep debating at that point, but a vote was called on the adjournment. They lost, so the decision was to adjourn it for the next sitting day. There was a break week in between there, so it wasn't for another several days. But that is what the adjournment refers to. It's putting off continuing the debate till the next sitting, or to the next agreed upon date. And so there's absolutely nothing that's out of the ordinary there. That happens all the time. The Conservatives were being kind of drama queens about what this meant, and were trying to make it sound like there was some kind of collusion or conspiracy or something that was to, trying to kill this bill, and that's not what it was at all. It was just there was an awareness on this leader's part that more members of her caucus wanted to speak to this bill, who were not able to that day. So it was just adjourning it till the next sitting day, and that was all it was. But the Conservatives have, not just in the Senate, but particularly in the House of Commons, have decided that they are going to try and ramp up the rhetoric around this to make it much worse sounding than it really was, and that's really what happened. So no real big mystery or anything out of the ordinary happened there. It's just the way it kind of shook out, and people were blowing it out of proportion for the sake of clicks. And that's everything for this week. Join us again next week for some more Canadian politics. I'm Dale Smith. It's at Journo_Dale on Twitter, and JournoDale_no_ on Bluesky. And don't forget to like the video, share, subscribe, and support us on Patreon. Thanks, everyone.